Did you notice this, Herc? I don't know if it's a coincidence or it's actually something much more important. There's not a single Mexican-American on either the U.S. or Mexico's World Cup roster. Wow. What do you make of that?
I don't know how far this would go back because I'm trying to think of Mexican-Americans on either roster, and there was one in, didn't go 2018. There was 2014 was there. I'm trying to think. I'm sure there must have been. 2010 there was. 2006 somewhere along for Mexico. It just seems like this year where the Mexican-American player was more sought after, and you had more of these fights over these players and more of these courtships, if you will, that there would have been not one but multiple players maybe on either side. You had about 4 called up for the Mexican national team that committed to the Mexican national team, a few to the U.S. men's national team, and nothing happened. And maybe that's circumstantial. Maybe it's Ricardo Pepi didn't make it because this happened, because Greg Berhalter values a certain type of player with a certain prototype of league and opponent that he is facing compared to the opponents that he will face in the World Cup. But it's a tough pill to swallow because for many years, I talk about how Mexican Americans, not only in the sport, but in this country, feel like they're neither from here, neither from there. Ni de aquí, ni de allá. They feel caught in the middle, and it's a tough place to be. Well, here we are, no Mexican Americans on either side. It almost justifies or strengthens, if you will, that argument, especially when you have the likes of Ricardo Pepi, Julian Araujo. You have Zendejas, who's a strong candidate, Brandon Vasquez. You have David Ochoa, Efrain Alvarez. Whatever you may think of these players, there's some serious talent here, and to see them not be on either roster, it's a tough pill.
Yeah. You mentioned 2014, Omar Gonzalez on the team there. There was, yes, a Mexican-American on the squad back then. I think it's mostly circumstantial,
Nick Romando as well. Sorry.
Because there's like each of these guys has a different story, both in terms of how they're playing right now, where they fit into the national team situation. If there is one line that I think we could draw between everybody, international football is becoming like a very condensed schedule, especially this cycle, Herc, right? With the year, maybe year plus that we lost to COVID, any player who is not in the pool for sure, right? If you're a manager of a team, you're saying, this guy is in my pool, I'm going to start planning for him, I'm going to start thinking about his role. If a guy is maybe in your pool, you don't look at him the same way until he commits. And so as these players wait to commit, I think it does maybe put them at a disadvantage when the national team managers are looking at other guys first and kind of developing those roles already in their minds. I'm not saying that it's anything unfair the coaches are doing, but you're a little bit late to the game if you have to pick between a side.
Yeah, and also when you pick between the side, you're picking with your heart, but you're also picking with your mind. Julian Araujo, who picked with his heart, and I think that's great. Maybe you think like Julian Araujo could have been on this U.S. men's national team squad. He couldn't have gotten into this roster. Things like that. And you just asked me Ricardo Pepi.
Yeah.
Under a certain coach, he could have gotten into the Mexican roster. So I see what you're saying, but I just think anytime you give these coaches the option of saying, let me just cap them and get it over with, and we'll go from there. When you fast-track these players, a lot gets lost in that development.
Of the players that kind of fit this description, Herc, for me, Zendejas is the guy that you're like, wow, really? Like, he's not going, especially with the needs for Mexico at that position. Obviously, now we're getting reports. It looks like he is leaning towards the U.S. after the World Cup. But for me, from a Mexican standpoint, what a huge player that could have been, especially in light of the Tecatito injury.
It's huge for both sides. It's huge for Mexico if they do lose him because he's a very talented player. That's really opened up a lot of eyes. And it's huge for the U.S. men's national team side because a la Haji Wright, a la Luca De La Torre, these players that were part of that setup with Christian Pulisic, Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie. Here's another one, Alejandro Zendejas. So that would be a huge addition to the U.S. men's national team.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.